So, welcome to our first webinar that we've run at Heart of Bucks. I'll just let you know that this is being recorded. So for those who are unable to attend, and yes, thank you very much for joining us. And I know that many of you in the room have supported our work, including by funding our sort of action and our activity around isolation, disadvantage, poverty, and in particular our crisis support work over the last 18 months. So for those of you that I've not met before, my name's Henry Ormond. I'm the Chief Executive of Heart of Bucks, and I have worked here for about 3 years now, and been very heavily involved in our funding and our grant making activity. So without further ado, the format for today, we're going to hear from 3 speakers, and I'll just briefly introduce them. So we're going to be hearing from Hannah Tomlin at Buckinghamshire Council. We're then going to take a short pause for any questions or reflections that anyone has. Please put them in the chat function. If you do have something, you should see a little sort of speech bubble at the top of your screen. If you click that, the chat function will open and you'll be able to type in any questions. We're then going to hear from 2 local charities who Heart of Bucks have supported and are very engaged with, the Bucks Food Partnership, and we'll hear from Sam Cartwright, and from Food Cycle, which is an innovative example of some of the local efforts to tackle food poverty and isolation, and we'll hear from Karen Hamilton there. That will be followed by a final round of questions and comments for the whole panel, and we will at that point also include one of our Heart of Bucks team here, Maria. Maria is our lead on crisis funding, so Maria has worked incredibly hard over the last few years distributing really significant sums of money in small targeted grants to households in Buckinghamshire, so that you'll have an opportunity to talk to Maria and ask her questions as well, and Maria may well chip in at that point. So yeah, really in terms of the housekeeping, please keep yourselves on mute. Feel free to turn your videos off, and please do put any questions you have as we go in the chat function, and I will do my best to compare. Right, so I think we're all good to go. Hannah, I'm going to throw over to you now. The floor is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Henry. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'm hoping this will all work. So there we go. Just checking everyone can see that. Just give me the nod. Perfect. Thank you.
I think you might need to go full screen, Hannah.
There we go. Perfect. So everyone see that? Great. So yeah, thank you, Henry. So my name's Hannah. I'm part of the Helping Hands team at Buckinghamshire Council, and my role within the team is predominantly to coordinate the food support within the team and across Buckinghamshire. So I thought I'd start and give a little bit of an overview in terms of the Helping Hands team and how we can support residents. So we were established around COVID times. So the team's function was to support people that were clinically extremely vulnerable and weren't able to access food and medicine. And we've really evolved since then. So now we support residents and families that are struggling financially, and we can support with lots of things, such as food bank referrals, supermarket vouchers, hot meal referrals, white goods. The list goes on really. But have a look at our website and see what other sort of support, but I know that we're focusing just on the food today, so I'm just going to focus on predominantly the food support that's available through our team. So as I said, we can support with food bank referrals, so we've got really good linkages with all of the food banks within Buckinghamshire and surrounding areas. We can also issue supermarket vouchers, so we sometimes find that residents maybe come to us on a Friday and where the food banks aren't open.
A little while I got back to.
Oh, sorry. Don't mind just going on mute. Thank you. And yeah, like I said, so we can issue supermarket vouchers where that sort of real immediate crisis support is needed. We can also make referrals to some of our hot meal schemes. So we find this particularly useful sort of around the colder periods like now, and for our elderly residents as well. And I just wanted to touch on some of the signposts and advice that we provide residents alongside sort of the emergency support. So we offer meal plans. So whenever we issue a supermarket voucher, we always issue a meal plan, which gives residents ideas how to cook sort of low budget healthy meals. We use the website mealplans.co.uk. We also signpost to Do Good To Go. So I don't know if anyone on the call's ever heard of Too Good To Go, but basically it's where food businesses and retailers can share surplus food for a reduced cost. So we find that really good. Quite a lot of our local supermarkets have signed up. So it's a really good way of residents being able to access fresh food at a low cost. We also signpost to Olio, our local community fridges, a website called Kitch. I will be sharing this presentation so you can have a look at all of the links separately. And I know Karen's on the call today, so we also signpost to Food Cycle, but I'll let her give her overview in Food Cycle. I won't take much time on that. So our offer. So we've received significant funds from government called the Household Support Fund. So we've just received the last tranche, which is 2.4 million to cover the period of April until March next year. So in total this year, I think we've received just over 4.8 million to support residents in Bucks. So we use those monies to be able to support with all of the sort of direct functions of the Helping Hands team, but also support our food VCS and our food banks and sort of community projects as well. I thought it'd be quite good to give everyone an overview in terms of the amount of referrals that have come into our team since sort of April to September this year. So we've had 5,400 referrals from residents and statutory organisations, and the below just shows the amount of, or the level of support that we've provided with food, fuel, white goods, carpeting, hot meal referrals, and also our grants that, yeah, Maria and the team have done some great work with helping us issue those out. So apologies for the image because it is probably quite small on your screen, but we've done some mapping of the county to understand where our food banks are located, we've got our community fridges and our cupboards, our food hubs and hot meal schemes and things. So as you can see from the map here, we've got quite significant coverage in terms of food banks, but the other schemes such as community fridges, growing sites and hot meal schemes, there's not a huge coverage in Bucks. So one thing that we're looking to look into the new year is to focus on sort of the development of more non-emergency food support schemes. So we're in talks with lots of different organisations about doing some really great work into the new year. So hopefully I can come back and sort of share an updated image to show the higher amount of sort of hot meal schemes and community fridges that we're going to have across the county next year. So this table here shows the amount of food parcels that have been distributed by all of our food banks over the last 2 quarters. So as you can see here, sort of April to June time, the food banks issued out sort of 7,500 parcels. And then this summer, 7,000. We always see a peak around sort of July time, and that's when the kids are off, probably eating more at home. And we just imagine that these stats, unfortunately, are probably looking to grow, especially as we head into the winter times. I really wanted to share some new and upcoming projects that we're supporting some of our VCS to develop across Buckinghamshire. So one of them is the Together We Can Dinner Club, and this is in partnership with One Can Trust. So they will be running daily meals for residents and families over the October half term. We've got 2 sites running, so one's going to be in Downley and the other one in Micklefield, and it's where residents can access a free meal, dinner time meal every day of the week, and they can also take food away. So you know, if there's any leftovers, they're able to use those throughout the week as well. Next is our Altogether Community Meals. So we've done a lot of great work with Altogether Community. So they established a community fridge in Chalfont St Giles in one of the local council car parks. sort of shortly after COVID. And they've done some really, really great work since. So we saw that there was sort of a need for hot meals in Chalfont St Giles and sort of the surrounding villages. So we've helped them to develop a weekly hot meal for all residents at a local community venue. This is another one of our recent projects. So it's in partnership with the Buckinghamshire New University. So 250 residents will be able to access a meal during the October half term. There's going to be some craft activities for the children, and there's also going to be helping hands present. So we've got what we quite often do with our community projects is make sure that there's either helping hand information or helping hand present, so that if families would like to speak with an officer, we can look into the support that we can put in place for them, because what we've really seen within the team is that quite often people come to us in the need of food support, but actually there's some real wider issues going on that we can, look to support with as well. So yeah, hoping that's going to be a great success. Next is a slow cooker project that we developed with two local organisations called Feedback and Kapira. So last year they developed a slow cooker project working with our local food banks to identify households that would be in need of possibly a slow cooker. And they also run cookery classes alongside this. So they used food bank parcel items to sort of support and help clients to understand how they can still make healthy, budget-friendly meals when in receipt of food support. And what we're looking to do later this year is actually develop a slow cooker and an air fryer project. Air fryers are something that's really close to my heart. Whenever I have any sort of leftover veg or anything in the fridge, it just goes straight in the air fryer. So I think this is going to be a huge success. Food Champions. So this is a sub-project which runs from our Street Association project within Buckinghamshire Council. So Food Champions basically are residents in streets that would like to sort of coordinate weekly, a fortnightly or a monthly connection in their local area for their local food bank. So we've just relaunched this campaign. We've now got coverage in Aylesbury, Chesham, Burnham and High Wycombe. And again, we'll be looking to expand this to other areas in the county in the new year. And lastly, so like I said, Karen is on the call today, but Food Cycle is very, very close to my heart. We've managed to develop a site in Aylesbury Vineyard. So this is one of our local food banks, which is absolutely great. I actually volunteer there as well. So yeah, absolutely love Food Cycle. And we're looking to develop a new site in High Wycombe next year. So I'm sure that Karen can fill us in all about that. So yeah, that's probably everything in a nutshell. I think I've covered everything just on time. So yeah, would welcome any questions.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was really helpful. I have one to kick us off,
Go for it.
if you don't mind. So how has the local sort of food offer in Buckinghamshire evolved since 2020? Because sort of I think it has changed quite significantly, and a sort of supplementary to that is how has the sort of the charity sector, the third sector, the voluntary sector partnership with the council been important in that evolution?
Yeah, I definitely think it has evolved. Like I said, sort of our team was developed in response to COVID, and it's evolved ever since. So before, there was still a good coverage of food banks, but we saw a lot of community-minded people set up local food schemes. So we saw a real sort of increase in community fridges, hot meal provision. I think people found during lockdown that they had a lot more time on their hands to be able to develop these kind of schemes, and they've flourished ever since, really. And sorry, Henry, what was your last point?
Sorry, I was on mute. How the partnership with the voluntary sector has been an important part of that evolution.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So one thing I forgot to mention actually is that I chair a group called the Buckinghamshire Food Access Group. So that brings together all of the food banks, all of our food support organisations and sort of statutory food services within Buckinghamshire. That was set up in response to COVID. So at the start, it was a real kind of crisis group where We were trying to manage funding, donations, and referrals through to sort of statutory organisations like the council, and that's grown ever since. And we found that group has been a real partnership effort. It's an opportunity to share any issues around donations, volunteers for our food banks, share best practice, see if other organisations would like to get involved in community projects. So yeah, that partnership with our VCS is so strong, and yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. And I don't want to steal Maria's thunder later on, but how has the engagement with the crisis funding sort of program, where we're sort of working together to distribute those grants to households, directly to households in Buckinghamshire, how has that helped and supported the sort of wider work?
Oh, it's life-changing, if I'm honest, for our residents. Like I said, quite often residents will just come in need of food support, and that's all that they think they need. But our team really look at the holistic approach to supporting residents. So, is it that they can't afford food because they're paying so much of on payments for arrears for their electricity or gas and things. So Maria and the team have been key in being able to sort of support that resident wider than just food, and kind of get them out of that crisis situation. So yeah, massive thank you to Maria and the team.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If anyone's having difficulty with the chat function, please do. Oh, wait, no, we've got a question. Here we go. From Nate. Hi, Hannah. Could you give your top main priorities at the council for 2023 from your broad overall perspective across the county?
Okay, I'll give my personal objectives within sort of my role. I would love to increase the amount of community fridges and non-emergency food support schemes that we have in Buckinghamshire currently. We've got a really good foundation, so we've almost got a toolkit ready for communities to be able to set up, like I said, community fridges and hot meals and things. So for me, that is a real key focus, and also just broadly raising awareness of the Helping Hands team, because I think sometimes, residents, when they've never had to access support before, they don't know where to turn. So for me, getting the message out to as many people about Helping Hands in the future, yeah, definitely. I will be able to share, I can sort of share it with my presentation to the group. We're developing a lot of work in line with Opportunity Bucks, so the Levelling Up programme from central government, and the cost of living programme that we're also rolling out in Buckinghamshire. So they'll have sort of the main council priorities around addressing the cost of living, which will of course include food. So I'd be more than happy to share that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. So again, I'll just reference the chat function. There we go. More questions are piling in now, Hannah. The figures that you've provided regarding how many people that you've helped over the last 6 months
Yep.
showed a significant decrease in adults helped in September 2022. Joe's obviously got a good eye for the figures.
Yep.
Is this a normal pattern? And if not, why do you think this is?
We always see a drop when children go back to school. So when, those adults are probably back at work, not accessing, there's maybe not as much need for food bank use in September. And also we did a huge push within Buckinghamshire around Helping Hands around the summer holidays. So, it might be that we've put a large level of support in place for the summer, which then shows the drop from September. That's sort of the only explanation I can think of right now. Just summer holidays out of the way, and adults are back at work.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. So, we have a question here from Sarah Lynn. Following on from your last comment, how do you currently advertise Helping Hands?
So we have details on our website. We also have hard copies of leaflets, so they're in all of our council libraries at the moment. We always take leaflets out when we're visiting sort of VCS and statutory organisations. So all of the food banks have Helping Hands leaflets. They even pop the leaflets in the parcels for residents. Older people's groups, dementia groups, through our social prescribers within the GP surgery. So I do feel like our reach is wide, but it probably could be wider. So yeah, we try and get out and about as much as we can, but the outreach side of things has had to take a little bit of a step down just because of how much demand there is in the team currently.
And I suppose the real difficulty, Hannah, as well, is the people that are truly isolated are
Yeah,
going to be very difficult to contact for anything,
yeah.
and will tuck themselves away and will have very limited social contact with anybody. And I suppose they're the ones that we've really got to work harder to get to.
Yeah, completely. We do a lot of work with Carers Bucks, which has been really, really successful actually. So being able to reach those people that might not necessarily come across Helping Hands. We also did a mail out to all of our pensioners that were in receipt of council tax discount as well. So we found that was a really, really good way of being able to put some comms out in terms of Helping Hands and the support available to them. So we're trying to reach as far and wide as we can, but I'm sure that we can go wider.
Great stuff. Well, I think that might be the last questions. So Hannah, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us all that information. It's been a real pleasure working with Buckinghamshire Council on the extensive sort of crisis support that we've been able to provide to the local community, in partnership with yourselves. So yeah, thank you very much, and to the wider team.
No problem.
Brilliant stuff.
Likewise,
Okay.
Henry. Thank you.
No worries. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the Bucks Food Partnership. So can I please introduce Sam Cartwright, who's going to talk a little bit about that organisation and give you an overview of their work and their role within Buckinghamshire. So welcome, Sam.
Just a moment, Henry. Struggling a little bit with my mic. I'm just going to share some slides. So hello, everyone. Bear with me a moment while I do that. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that slide on there, and I've been asked to speak for just 5 minutes. So I'm just going to keep this very short and sweet and introduce ourselves as a charity. So I'm Sam Cartwright, and I'm the director of Buckinghamshire Food Partnership. So we're a new charity that's taking a whole system approach to food sustainability. We don't deliver frontline services. Instead, we're aiming to make long-term improvements across the whole of the food chain. So that's from where food's grown on a farm, through the local supply chain, to what we have on our dinner plates and what's left afterwards. So we're a member of the National Network of Sustainable Food Places. We have a website that's there and a contact email, which is there. So who are we? Well, our charity was formally born in June 2021. We have 2 payrolled staff. Myself, I joined in February this year, and Viv, who has just joined us as coordinator. We've got a board of 7 trustees who are drawn from across the public, private and charity sector, and all of them have got a connection to or a strong interest in food sustainability. Our main funder is the Rothschild Foundation, and we have some additional funding from Sustainable Food Places, and we kindly receive some from Hearts of Bucks as well. We're working with a range of strategic and grassroots stakeholders, which includes those groups listed there. And we're looking to grow this network and to partner on strategic projects and to support local collaborations. So why do we exist? Well, you've probably all heard at some point that our food system is broken, and unfortunately Bucks is no exception. So although nearly 80% of the county is farmed, most of this is under intensive methods of commodity food production. So most of these commodity crops, things like cereals, dairy and beef, they go on to centralised markets and processing facilities. And a proportion of this ends up being made into highly processed junk food, which is often cheaper than the healthy alternatives, but of course has a terrible cost for our health. And then food in its packaging is one of the greatest sources of our mounting waste and carbon emissions problem. And we also, of course, have high levels of food poverty, some of the highest in the country. which is a terrible statistic. But the key thing is that all these issues are interconnected, and it's only by looking at the whole picture that we can make things better in the long term. And until now, there's been a gap for some kind of unifying entity that can oversee the whole of the local food system. And so we're here to fill that gap. So if our food system is broken, what does a good one look like? Well, simply put, a good one is a sustainable one. Sustainable means one that's good for our local environment, one that's good for our people, and one that's good for Buckinghamshire's economy. Now, in practice, this looks like regeneratively farmed, local food that's nutrient rich and tasty, that includes foods that are characteristic of Buckinghamshire, that's readily available to people wherever they live in the county, and it must be affordable. It must nourish our population, especially the next generation. It must also support local food businesses, and it must only generate the minimum waste and pollutants in its journey. So that might all sound utopian, but the point is that we have to move away from the status quo. So what's our role in all this? And more importantly, how can you be involved? Well, dealing with system change is incredibly complicated, with many elements and many stakeholders involved. So first, we need to better understand the state of Buckinghamshire's food system by mapping it all out, so we know where to focus our efforts. We already know there's a lot of beneficial local activity going on. You've heard about a great deal of that already. But we want to facilitate more of this across the whole of that food chain and help to replicate what we already know works. So the goal of this is to generate large-scale change through the sum of many local actions, as well as at the same time strategically targeted interventions. So please do get in touch and we'll keep you informed of our progress. Do speak to me about any project ideas you have to see if they fit with our approach. And I'd like to invite you to be part of the strategic or the focused conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. That was really insightful. And I wonder if you might just, while we're listening to the next presenter, stick your website details in the chat so that the audience might be able to visit your website easily from that. So we're going to go straight into the next presenter, and then we're going to pause for questions from both Sam and Karen. So I will introduce now Karen Hamilton from Food Cycle, who are a local charity and have been referenced by the local authority and are a fantastic organisation. So without further ado, Karen, if you'd like to, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Henry, and thanks for inviting me. So yeah, I'm Karen Hamilton. I'm head of programmes at Food Cycle, which is actually a national charity, but we work very locally. Thank you also to Hannah for the little appetizer that you gave about Food Cycle earlier. And I'd just like to echo what Hannah said about working in partnership. So we've just quite recently come into Buckinghamshire to work, and actually our relationship with Buckinghamshire Council and Heart of Bucks has been really, really vital to us. Coming and establishing ourselves and working together is a really important part of that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Food Cycle generally, and then I'll talk about what we're doing in Buckinghamshire. So as I said, Food Cycle is a national charity, and our aim is to nourish hungry and lonely people through community sit-down meals. So we aim firstly to complement, not compete with other existing food providers. And what we're about is getting people to come in and have a sit-down, hot, delicious community meal. So it's about getting good food, but it's also about getting company as well. And we've certainly found, particularly I would say since lockdown, that there are a lot of people that come to us not just because they might want a hot meal, but also because they want other people to eat with. So we've currently got 60 projects across the country. And so far this year, across all those projects, we've served over 55,000 meals. And we have liberated, as I always say, 170 tonnes of surplus food. So all our meals are, we make use of surplus food. So food that supermarkets or other food providers would otherwise send to landfill. Perfectly good food, but food that would otherwise go to waste. And in each of those 60 projects, we take the food, and then it's teams of amazing volunteers who turn it into normally 3-course meals, sometimes 2-course meals, always vegetarian. That avoids a lot of problems such as use by dates on meat and fish, and it also means that culturally it's more accessible for everybody to come to. And thirdly, it's important because some of the people that come to us, because they're living in severe food poverty, don't get fresh fruit and vegetables, and so it really is healthy, nourishing food. We sometimes, if there's food left over at the end of the meal, we also send people away either with leftovers or bags of ingredients. Although, like I said, it really is about sitting down and eating together, because we also find that a lot of people that come to us don't have facilities or maybe capacity to cook at home. And so for some people, and Hannah will know from Aylesbury, some people it's the only hot meal they get in a week. So we came to Buckinghamshire, first of all, launching in Aylesbury on the 26th of July this year at Aylesbury Vineyard. We serve a hot meal there on Tuesdays at 6:30 in the evening. So far, we've served 272 guest meals, and the volunteers always eat with us as well. And we've used nearly 300 kilograms of surplus food in Aylesbury so far. Our average number of guests per project nationally is about 30. In Aylesbury, we're building up to that at the moment. You know, it's a new project. It takes a little while to spread the word. Although incidentally, we're finding in some of our other more established projects that actually the issue we're facing there is that sometimes more people are turning up than we've got seats for, you know, because I think it's something we're going to see more and more with cost of living crisis. High Wycombe, we are launching on the 11th of January, and that will be a hot meal every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and that's going to be at Oakridge Baptist Church. And just before I finish, I've got 2 asks. Firstly, for Aylesbury, if anyone wants any flyers to hand out to people, then please let me know, and I'd be very happy to pass on some publicity materials. And secondly, for High Wycombe, we're still trying to establish our food surplus supply for High Wycombe. So if anyone has links to surplus food suppliers in High Wycombe, or who wants to make food donations for High Wycombe, please let me know about that. And happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Karen. That was a really good insight to a really innovative project that's combining that problem of social isolation and food and hunger, and seeing how those things go hand in hand. I think has been really impactful, and it's an organisation that we're very happy to support at Heart of Bucks. So we're now going to move into the final part of the webinar, which is just general queries for all of our speakers. And at this point, I'll just reintroduce Maria from Heart of Bucks, who's our crisis funding officer, as I said. So Maria will be also able to take questions if anyone has any queries about the crisis funding element of our work and how we're supporting individuals with individual households who are living through a crisis. So I have got a couple of questions already in the chat, so thank you very much. Firstly, from Gary. Hi, Gary. How can we understand and avoid duplication of services? With so many organisations offering food parcels, people could be receiving multiple deliveries that in itself could create waste. I think that's a very good question. And I might just throw this one to Hannah. because I know Hannah's looking at that sort of whole system of the food banks and emergency support. So, Hannah.
Yeah, no problem. So all of our food banks have referral systems in place, so they can very easily see, say, for example, if Helping Hands have made a referral for Joe Blogs, or CAB have made a referral for Joe Blogs, they can see that there's 2 referrals coming for that one resident, so they would only action 1 food parcel. Also with sort of where we've got food banks, multiple food banks, say in one area like Aylesbury, they've got really, really good communication. So in Aylesbury, we've got the Aylesbury Vineyard, South Court Baptist Church, and the Trussell Trust Food Bank. But all of those have really, really great communication to ensure that there isn't that duplication of service. So I think for me, it's one, communication between our VCS, which I think is strong, especially through our Buckinghamshire Food Partnership and Food Access Group. And yeah, the referral systems that are already in place do sort of minimise duplication.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. Maria, I might just throw to you on that one as well, just in specific reference to the crisis funding. And I just wondered if you want to talk a little bit about how we ensure that we don't duplicate fund households who are experiencing a crisis.
Sure. The applications that come to us obviously are named and there are addresses on them, and we do obviously keep the details. So if a person is coming back to us multiple times, we will notice it, and that would be that would highlight possibly need for further support, because we like to provide a more holistic support here as well. So it may be that they may need to be referred for budgeting support, or back to perhaps the citizen's advice for maximising benefit entitlement. So it may be suggestive of a bigger problem, but we do sort of keep an eye on perhaps the names if we notice it's the same person that's coming through over and over again. But that very, very, very rarely happens. Most people that approach us are people that come to us for the first time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Maria. I can see Gary typing a follow-up. In the interim, I will come to Nate's question. So he says, "Thank you, Sam and Karen. Really brilliant work that you're both doing. I was struck by the Einstein quote on your last slide. It is clear that you've both spent a lot of time researching the problem, as Sam put it. What would you say is the question we should be asking ourselves and our teams to help us solve that problem?" And I'm going to go to Sam first, who I think has probably done the most thinking on this particular topic.
I think that's it's a brilliant question, really, and it does get to the heart of what we're all actually trying to do here, which is better understand the problem. I would say that what I've spent a lot of time doing is trying to understand the best approach to ascertaining how we get to asking the question, which might sound like a bit of a circular answer, but the truth is, what we're still wrestling with is answering that question exactly, because we've got we know that the food system is so incredibly complicated. We know that there's a combination of a very urgent crisis in various aspects of the food system, from the climate crisis, our environmental crisis, the loss of biodiversity, the cost of living crisis, and of course the crisis of food poverty locally. We know those things are all connected, but we really need to ascertain the best way to target where we can have the strongest intervention that will build better resilience across the system as a whole. So, to cut a long story short, one of the most important first steps that we want to take is to conduct a comprehensive review of everything that we already know, to try and identify where our key gaps in knowledge are, understand the extent to which we can start to predict what the trends are going to be in the future, and start to ascertain how we can target some key interventions that will truly make a difference. So I'm afraid that doesn't quite answer your question. I think because we are such a young organisation and we're not really there yet. But I think just looking at your question is also directed at how the question we should all be asking ourselves. And I think a lot of that boils down to your personal affinity to the issues that are at stake, because you could channel your effort at different dimensions of the entire food system, but you've got to realize, because it's connected, that will have benefits everywhere else. So I think it does boil down to your personal preference, as it were. Does that help
Brilliant.
at all?
Thank you, Sam. That's great. And I'm going to bring in two of our speakers on that point. I think Hannah and then Karen as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so as an authority, one thing that we're keen to focus on is around income maximisation. So what we found is that some residents come through to Helping Hands and they're actually entitled to benefits or grants that they didn't know they were. So one key sort of piece of work for us is ensuring that our residents are getting the most amount of support that's available to them as possible. We're also doing a lot of return to work activity. So this coming Friday, tomorrow, we are running a return to work event in High Wycombe. There's going to be sort of employability services and advice around how to return back to work, including sort of mental health support, anxiety. You know, there's so many things that sort of feed into this the food realm, really. So I would say Helping Hands, similar to what Maria said, you know, we really look at that holistic approach to supporting residents, which in the hope that will eventually get them out of that food poverty cycle.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. And Karen, if you'd like to come in.
Thanks. Yeah, just to touch on what both Nate and Gary have said, and I guess particularly from a food cycle point of view, I think that we don't ask any questions to people that come through our doors. So we don't have a referral process. We don't have criteria. Anyone can come in and sit down and have a meal with us. And indeed, just about anyone can come and volunteer with us as well. And we're also finding that more people are signing up as volunteers who are hungry because they get a meal as well. And we don't want to ask questions of the people that come through our doors. Of course, we know that a large majority of people are hungry or lonely or both. But for us, I think that an important part of the solution is really working with other providers in an area. So, for example, there's a finite amount of surplus food, and competition is often fierce for those food slots from providers. And I think the important thing is working with all providers in an area to make sure that we're all fairly going for the food supply that we need and that we can make use of. We don't want to be there sort of elbowing with everyone else. We want to all work together to make sure that ultimately the people that need the food get it. And secondly, I agree, food poverty is a symptom of other problems. And one thing that I didn't mention, but we've been doing at Food Cycle, and we're expanding the service, is a signposting function. So working with people like Hannah to make sure that our volunteers are trained so that if it becomes evident that somebody has debt issues or wants advice on employability or other issues that come up like domestic violence or mental health problems, we have the network internally and externally to signpost those people on so that they get help.
Thank you, Karen. That's really helpful. And just before I bring Maria in for a comment, I'd just like to address that point, Gary, that you've made there about you know, making sure we're connected and looking at that holistic support, which I think is a very good comment. I started working at the Community Foundation in 2019, so pre-pandemic, the good old days, and the partnerships and the effective working practices that are in place now between lots of different organisations is completely different to what it was in 2019. That's not a criticism of what it was like in 2019. It's just a statement of fact. And I think where we are now within the voluntary sector, relationships with statutory bodies is a huge improvement. But we're not there yet. I don't think it's a case of like, you know, job done. It's a case of we've done very well getting those partnerships and those conversations going, and there's been some really positive outcomes for people, but we need to keep that momentum going. So I think it's a really good point, and one that we're all very conscious of in this, who are working in this space. Maria, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to, I mean, I'm echoing sort of Hannah and Karen's point earlier, because I'm just looking at the food poverty as a symptom, and obviously there are other issues. At Heart of Bucks, we work with advocates across the community from various organisations who are working with people and families and individuals perhaps with mental health issues. So we do get applications from across a massive spectrum, but also from our side, when an application does come in, when I'm assessing it, if I notice something doesn't quite look right with perhaps the benefits, we will signpost. So we provide a wraparound support. So we may signpost to perhaps the citizens advice or for budgeting support. If we notice that perhaps there's a young carer in the family, and that carer is looking after an older family member and they are not getting support themselves, we may very gently recommend to the advocate that approaching perhaps somebody like Carers Bucks or something like that. So we do try and signpost as well where we can to get as much help basically to the individual and family as we possibly can. So it's not just about grant making, it's also about trying, I suppose, just to lift the individual and family up just a little bit.
Thanks, Maria. Fantastic.
Sorry, just reading the question.
Gary has come. Gary, you're normally so quiet. I'm surprised you've got so many questions. Gary's got another question. Maria, are you talking about the community angels donations? So I'll interject if I may on that one actually. So the yes, we are in the round. So the crisis support money that we manage, which is Family Angels, is no longer something that we do. We have a broader appeal called the Crisis Appeal, which covers everything. The crisis, the Family Angels fund is no more. But we, yes, essentially we're talking about those direct payments from Heart of Bucks, funded by organisations like the local authority and many generous private philanthropists and donors. And we distribute that. And I don't know whether at that point, Maria, it's worth mentioning the sort of figures that we're talking about that are going out,
Sure.
you know, the average grant size and the total distribution.
Yeah, of course. We've given out 837,000 since September 2020 to September 2022. This year, since January, that number's 541,000. So demand is increasing. We've reached 3,500 beneficiaries, and that's across 1,300 applications. And the average award size, I think it's just under £840 at the moment. And we're awarding for everything from food to energy and water. So that's gas, electricity bills, water bills, housing costs, perhaps rent arrears, uniform, shoes. The list goes on. It's a massive list of awards, but the demand is increasing. This year has been quite phenomenal, and I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon.
Thanks, Maria.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think the issue that we're seeing on that sharp end, on that crisis end, is that people are having to make choices. So this isn't about not having money to buy food. This is about paying your rent or buying food, or buying food and not paying your rent. And that's the challenge that we're seeing at the critical sharp end. And unfortunately, that sharp end is quite big now. The problem has become, you know, in the thousands as opposed to in the hundreds. And we've seen that probably in the last 3 years, that number just exploding. And as you say, no real end in sight, I don't think. So yeah, it's a dreary outlook, I think, but lots of positive activity are taking place to support those people. Hannah, did you have a point?
Yeah, it was just to ask Marie, actually. I don't know if you know on the top of your head, but who's the highest referring agent for the crisis scheme at the moment? Do you know?
Yes, Katie Galvin.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so
Katie,
Helping Hands.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we do a huge amount of work with the local authority, because the local authority has the widest door, I would say, in that respect, in that there are everyone has some contact with the council in some way, shape or form. So naturally the local authority gets that, those big referral numbers, and the helping hand team are processing, yeah, some scary numbers, aren't they, of people needing support. I'm gonna I've been thinking about Nate's question, and I've got a bit of a question for the audience, and maybe more just a comment. You know, are we prepared as a society to make the wholesale changes that we need to? You know, I think that's the question for me. We talk about you know, identifying the right question to ask around food, and I think there are some such huge issues with, as Sam touched on, the almost like the externalization of cost. So, you know, an apple versus a can of Coke, and the can of Coke is cheaper, but the apple is more expensive. But the true societal cost of that can of Coke is immeasurable. So going right back to the beginning of the food cycle, the food process, there are some real fundamental issues, I think, with the food system. And you know, the cost of food is probably going to keep going up. We're seeing, you know, the percentage of household budget being spent on food probably in the next 25 years is going to grow. It's going to get much bigger, and that's going to make these issues at the sharp end that Maria and Hannah are talking about even more critical. You know, it's going to get more unaffordable unless we make some fairly radical changes to society. Aaron, we've got a question. Or is that a comment? Our guest surveys have shown that the number of people struggling to buy food they need has trebled since November last year. I mean, that's another stat, isn't it? That just shows you the desperate need. Do we have any other questions from our audience? Any final comments or things that anyone would like to say? Thanks, Hannah, for putting that Food Foundation link in the chat as well. That's very helpful. So unless we have any more, I can see Gary typing, so I'll hold fire on winding up until he's furiously typed. But I think I'd like to say thank you to start with for everybody, for the participants, for the speakers. It's been a really useful, really helpful conversation, and thank you very much to everybody who's joined in the audience, and hopefully you found it interesting. We'll be in touch. We'll send a follow-up email. We're really keen to get your feedback on this format and whether you found it helpful for perhaps running other sessions on different subjects that are important to Buckinghamshire. So yes, I'll close by saying thank you once again. It's been really good to see everybody, and take care.